The Silly Goose Gang podcast.
There we go.
There we go, and we're back in, and we have made it to episode 50 of the Silly Goose Gang podcast, which is crazy to consider when me and Chris started this. We thought we'd maybe get to 2 or 3 episodes, and what better way to bring up the half century than bringing back on Command Master Chief Jason Gardner. So Jason, awesome. Thanks for coming back in.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We started to discuss episode 50 around about episode 35. Shit, we probably better think of something cool. So when we talked to you the first time, we spoke for a while and everything was fine. But when you started to tell some war stories, the Taliban, the 4-day Taliban fight,
Yeah.
you could see that you came alive. Like, oh, okay, you came alive. So we went, okay, like, why do we not ask Jason back on and let him share some war stories? So yeah, it was that was one of the things that people really liked when people talk to us, message us about who we spoke to. People saying, "Hey, that was awesome. That 4-day firefight, it was just amazing. So it's such a funny image. Taliban guy running away on fire."
Yeah.
So you thought you'd be the guy for the job. Come back in. So yeah, it's I'm not sure why people love to hear military guy stories. I think it's I don't know if it's like, war films glamorize it and people love the idea, but yeah, we like to hear them as well.
There's little, anytime you can hear somebody else going through something that's kind of hard, it's always definitely entertaining, and there's something that you can just file away and learn from it.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
it's definitely a lot more interesting than talking about going through an Excel spreadsheet and
Well, this is-
accounting.
One of the things that I took from the first podcast with you was how I approached it. So I changed my approach in terms of asking questions and stuff. Probably asked the wrong questions at the wrong time. So I think I started off asking. I think because there was some stuff going on in America, and I asked something about politics to begin with. It was probably the stupid place to start. So I learned from that. Like I say, we got onto war, and your eyes lit up, and you went, okay, I understand what Jason likes to talk about now.
Yep.
So yeah. So as with everything in life, I learned don't ask somebody about politics probably from the get go, and don't put your head over open horseradish. That's something you learn as well, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're all learning. So So as where do you start talking about? Where do you start asking questions about war stories? I don't even know where you start. What would be? Do you remember your first firefight on deployment?
Oh yeah, the first real firefight that I was in Somalia in 1995 when I was a platoon sniper, and we talked about that one a little bit on the last podcast, but I don't think we really dug into it.
No.
And we were there to help the UN leave because this is 1995, and the UN was just like kind of ending their humanitarian mission in Somalia. So the Marines got tasked with setting up all the protections so that they could get all their stuff and get out. And because we had the capability of a 50 cal sniper rifle, the Marines brought us ashore with them, and that's what we did. We were ashore in Mogadishu for like maybe 3 full. We had the 50 cal sniper capability, and the Marines thought that would be a good deal to have that surgical, ability to reach out to like 1,400 yards and take out a target. So we were able to augment the forces of the Marines and go ashore. So we rode into the beach there on these shuttles of these big hovercraft, and they've got like a 40-foot shipping container griped down, and that means like kind of tied down to the deck of the hovercraft, because the hovercraft is made to bring tanks ashore. But all of marine stuff is amphibious, and it can just go there on its own. So they had this thing rigged up. So they cram us all in this 40-foot mill van, and then the shipping container takes off the ship, and there's no windows, so you're just in there rocking, starting to get seasick. Finally, we land up on the beach. Beach party opens it up, and we push out to our defensive perimeters that we took that were already inside the UN position. So the UN controls the whole runway, right? So we set up a base kind of inside their base.
Okay.
I'd identified there was a bunker that was right there on the beach that I wanted to use as a fighting position that I'd identified from the imagery. And so we're like, okay, we're going straight to that. So I got like, I think there were 7 other SEALs with me, and we moved over towards that bunker. And we're like, oh, this is great. I mean, the thing is a cement pillbox, and it's got these slits in it that are it's just perfect, right? Except my barrel would stick through, and then my scope was just looking right at the wall.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay. So on the top of that bunker, we built ourselves a sandbagged fighting position that we would use then. So that's what we wound up doing. We did that all night. Next morning, sun comes up. The UN still controls the entire runway, so there really wasn't that much going on the first day, because nothing had changed. In the distance, in the downtown Mogadishu at night, we could see tracer fire going in the air, because there's always kind of little skirmishes and things going on out there. The next night at 3 a.m., all the manned defensive positions that had people at them on the airfield were replaced by armor, so tanks pulled up. And then, all the people were leaving, and when they left everything. And then at 6 a.m, all the tanks just pulled out of all the defensive perimeters and took off and went down to the Newport where they were going to get on ships and leave. So there's like an hour where no one in Mogadishu really knows that everyone's gone. And then, you start to see people looking over the wall, looking around, noticing no one's there. And then they're just coming over the walls and going, through all the buildings and stealing everything they can get their hands off. Now, they'd abandoned a couple other little bases that they had as well around Mogadishu, and there was another one that was on the kind of the hill, because Mogadishu slopes up. There's a big hillside from the airport, slopes up there, and there were just masses of people in there, looting it. They're pulling the roofing off. They're taking bottles of water and food out of there and all this stuff. And this is going on for a little while. Then the clan guys, the different tribal clans that are kind of like the warlords that are controlling Mogadishu, start to wake up and realize this is all gone and people are getting this stuff. And we see a Jeep pull up to a mass of people who's looting this vacated base that's a little ways away from us. And it's got a machine gun in the back, and the machine gunner just trains the machine gun at the people and just starts shooting them. And he's just killing people left and right. And you can see this, like when you throw a piece of soap into oily water, how it all just goes away. Everyone is going away from the gunfire. And then the clans took and held that base up there. And then more people were kind of coming down into this camp that was about 600 yards south of us on the south end of the runway, and they were looting that as well. But then a bunch of clans got that, and they got that all locked down. Now, my understanding of the situation on the ground there were these 2 main clans. One of them controlled, as it turned out, around 10:30 in the morning. One of the clans controlled the south end of the runway, and the other clan controlled the north end of the runway. And it's completely worthless to control half of a runway, right?
Yeah.
So a few hours later, all these technical vehicles, and the technical vehicles are, imagine like all the vehicles you see in Mad Max, like with guns. There's this huge, like 2.5-ton flatbed truck that they put a quad anti-aircraft gun, and it's got like, there's a guy sitting in a seat where they're like turning around. He's like, "Arr!" And we're like, holy cow! I hope that thing doesn't shoot at us. They had all kinds of pickup trucks with recoilless rifles in the back, Jeeps with, mounted with machine guns and all this. So all this Mad Max stuff is coming down the runway right in front of us towards the other camp. And tucked in behind them are like troops, all these fighters from, that clan. And they're like walking in lines the same way our infantry would move behind our armor. And so we're watching this stuff, and I'm like, dude, I'm looking at this 50 cal sniper rifle I got. That's basically a pea shooter against this stuff, thinking, okay, I hope they don't come after us. So they were really careful that they didn't ever point any of their weapons at us. They get within about 300 yards of that base that's 600 yards to our south, and they start to take fire from that base. And they're taking heavy fire from the base, and then they're taking heavy fire from a hillside that's up behind it. And it turns into be a big firefight, to where that quad anti-aircraft gun was tracking up on the hill where that clan had a headquarters up there, and just dunk, just laying down incredible fire, crushing everything up there. They're shooting rockets back and forth. And then the guys are shooting back at them. The little infantry, the infantry guys that were with all those big technicals, they actually made it into the first couple buildings, and then they got shot out of them. And eventually they just gave up and went the other way. Now, while this is all going on, we're kind of on the other side of where this big firefight was at. So there were a lot of rounds coming our directions and munitions and stuff like that. But, when we understood, like, hey, they're not actually shooting at us, this is just spillover. Okay. Then a little bit later, I see a guy. We start to take intermittent small arms fire. So, it sounds like a bullwhip when a bullet whizzes past your head, and when it breaks the sound barrier, it makes that a sonic boom. So this thing goes whizzing by, or we're hearing crack, and we're looking around, and these guys are smart. They're not out in the open shooting us. They're like, back in alleyways and shooting from windows and stuff, and there's tons of buildings out there. So we can't see them. And then one of the guys with me goes, hey, or no, I was looking up at one of these buildings on the hillside, and I saw a huge dust cloud on a roof. And I'm like, huh. And then rocket propelled grenade comes sailing by us. It's high. It winds up hitting the ocean right behind us. Explodes. And we're like, oh, okay. So now we're looking, with our stuff for the guy with the rocket propelled grenade. Can't ever find them because, again, they're smart and people just don't want to die. They don't stand out in the open with their RPGs, So then about an hour later, we see a technical, which is a big truck, driving up on the top of this hillside, and it's got a big 107 recoilless rifle on the back, and it pulls behind. I see it in an alleyway. I see it in another alleyway, and then I don't see it. And then I see a big dust cloud, and then boom, they shot long. And then we don't see the technical again. So at that point, the officer in charge of my platoon, who's with me, he goes, okay, hey, everybody over in that direction is bad. They're obviously shooting at us. So find someone if they have a weapon or something and shoot them. So we're like, okay, game on. Now we're going to get after it. Start looking around. One of my spotters says that he can see a guy in, like a wire fence and with an AK-47. I'm like, oh, here we go. So he's talking me into it. And he's looking through 10 power binos, and I've got some better binoculars than he does. And the talk on is taking forever. And finally, we established that what he thought was a guy with an AK-47 was a trash bag that was hung up in concertina wire around one of the fighting positions that they'd argued about, for a while. But it was crazy. He was convinced it was a person with an AK-47. So that winds down, things quiet out, and then we just stop taking fire for the next hour. Then we see like 7 guys, and they're patrolling through this camp 600 yards to our south. 3 of them have got rocket-propelled grenades. One of them has got a PKM, which is a big belt-fed machine gun. It's like our M60, and the rest of them have got AK-47s, and they're walking in a line. They're doing a singular patrol, and so I tell the OIC, I'm like, hey, we've got some targets here. They're moving toward us, and he's like, okay, well, wait, let's see what they're gonna do. So we kind of calmed down now, and then back in the 90s. We hadn't been at war, and so our thresholds for killing people were set really high. So these guys walk all the way out through the camp, and at the very front of that camp, facing in our direction, are what was like the guard shack for access to that camp along the runway. And there were 2 C-shaped sandbag positions that were set up along that camp, facing us where the guards could hide behind the sandbags. They all come into the middle of those sandbags. There's a guy, he's wearing a gray army shirt, right? His gray shirt says Army across the front. He's got a rocket-propelled grenade that he's carrying, and he's obviously the guy in charge because he's pointing at guys, and he's telling them to go here and go there. Then he starts pointing down right in our direction. So guy with the PKM, the big belt-fed machine gun, sets up in one of the positions. The other guy sets up in the other, in the other position, and he takes the rocket-propelled grenade and he puts it to his shoulder, and he is looking at us through the sights. And so my leading petty officer, he says to the OIC, and is in my direct leadership, he goes, hey, they're preparing to fire on us, and we need to get him before he shoots that rocket. And the OIC tells us, okay, you're cleared hot. So I am leveled up on this. I have my 50 cal sniper rifle rested on the sandbags. I've got a really janky shooting position, and so I'm kind of wobbly, and this is the first time I've ever shot at a human being. So I shoot. Boom! Now, our old 50 cal sniper rifles, you had to knock the bolt open, pull the entire bolt out of the weapon, knock out the expended brass, grab a new round, stuff it in there, reload, shoot again. It was kind of a process. So I shoot. I look to my spotter, who happened to be, and he wasn't a trained spotter. He was just another one of the SEALs, because there were only 2 snipers in my platoon. The other sniper was at another position. And so he was just about 2 feet to my left on the sandbags, right in the perfect spot to eat all the backblast from the 50 cal. Because it's got a big muzzle brake on the end, so that it does it, so that the recoil doesn't break your collarbone, and it ports all those gases backwards. And I look over to get him to give me a call, and he's like, he's got sand in his eyes, and the dang spotting scope is fallen over, and so I'm like, did I hit? And behind me, Monty Treesize is watching through a little set of and he was my LPO. He's looking through binos, and he's like, no, you missed. And And I'm like, well, can you give me a correction? And he's like, I can't. Okay. So right now, I've got no correction. For all I know, I could be off by like half a mile. I'm really starting to doubt myself. I reload another round. I get hard on the weapon. I push in. I lock in a little harder. You know, they taught us, to control the adrenaline, we'll control our breathing. So I start pacing my breathing and I'm looking. And so downrange, and all this has happened in a matter of seconds, right? Downrange, the guy with the gray army shirt is kind of startled because I didn't miss him by much. And he's looking around, and then he's facing me square on, and he's got that rocket propelled grenade shouldered, and he's getting ready to shoot it. I discharge the round. The recoil takes me off the weapon. As I'm coming back, I'm knocking that bass open and reloading, and I'm yelling for a correction. And our comms guy, our communication guy, had grabbed his binos and tucked in the sandbags next to me, just a little further down so the backblast wouldn't get him. And he is looking through the binos, and he goes, "Oh, God damn." And I'm like, "Hey, where did I hit?" And he goes, "Dang," basically. And I'm like, "Where did I hit?" I hit him, and he's not even hearing me. So I'm like, "Dude, give me a correction." And he goes, I'm thinking he's going to say, "Bro, you missed by like half a mile. I have no idea what to tell you." And the next words out of his mouth is like, he goes, "He is down." Oh, that had to hurt. So I'm like, okay. My gun is dialed in. I'm good. Reload the next round, and as I'm looking down there, now we're starting to hear gok, 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 gok. This is the quick snaps, but it's obviously from that PKM, which is the belt-fed machine gun. It's like a 30 caliber belt-fed machine gun. And so I swing over, I look at him, and here's a C-shaped sandbags, and all I can see is this big muzzle flash. That's it. So what do? I figure I'll put the crosshairs right in the middle of that muzzle flash, because he's got to be behind it. I shoot, reload, recoil takes me off the, bumps me back, reloading, come back up, look, and I'm looking, and I'm looking where he was on the sandbag, and there's this big divot caught out of the sandbag, and the gun, the PKM, is spilled over the front of the sandbags, and it's just a mess, basically. And off to the left side of the sandbags, there's the shooter, and he's just the round must have hit the gun, exploded, and started to expand because it almost ripped him in two. And he's there looking at all of his guts, and his guts had sprung out of him like those novelty snakes coming out of the can of cookies. Boing, boing, boing. They're everywhere. So he's like just holding him for a second, and then he's dead. And then somebody yells, "Everybody get down." And I figure, okay, well, that sounds like a good idea. So I get down, I'm behind the sandbags, we're all behind the sandbags, and then sounds like a jet is flying over us. This rocket propelled grenade maybe was a meter over the top of our position. Goes back out, air bursts a couple 400 yards behind us. And then there's a big, steady thump, 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 like the double bass drum in a Slayer song. And I pop my head back up, and this Jeep has shown up right now. So there's this red Jeep down there, and it's got a 12-7, and I think it's like 50 cal. It's a 51 caliber. It's a big gun mounted in the back, and all I can see is the gunner just going gunk, 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 gunk. And I'm lucky because all his rounds are high, because those things would have been coming straight through the sandbags and done us all in. So now I'm a little bit more nervous. I'm like, geez, I think we've really grabbed a tiger by the tail here. I rush a shot at the gunner. I wind up hitting the sidewall of the Jeep down between the gunner's legs. And I don't know if I wounded anybody, but it was enough for them to get that Jeep out of there. So the Jeep takes off, and now the other, 5 guys, they're now doing what we call a peel, which is a tactic. And these guys were really tactically savvy, as you would guess, probably because all they do is fight there. And so they're doing a peel deeper into that base that they'd come out the front of it. And what that is they're all shooting, and then one guy will run from one end to the other, fall in. They are all shooting, and then the next guy, and it's like a big Indian run that they're doing to fall back to a further position. So they're moving, and as they're doing this, my LPO has got the range card that I developed before I went in there, and he's like, "Okay, hey Jason, you need to adjust your scope right now. They're now at 600 yards." So I dial up. I can see them moving. I shoot at a runner. I hit way behind him. Then they keep moving, and they're peeling towards this building that winds up being 700 yards away. So there's another scope adjustment. I'm shooting at another runner. As he's running, I hit behind him again, and they all peel behind the building. So now I just got my crosshairs holding on the corner of this building. So this will be great because I can look at the camera, and so here's what I see. So you got, this is the,
Is it frozen on your end?
Yeah. I don't know if he's walked too far away.
yeah, no, I'm back. So this guy walks back out, and my crosshairs are resting on his pelvis when I start to load the trigger, right? As I'm loading the trigger, he takes a knee to shoot his rocket-propelled grenade, putting the crosshairs on his sternum. Boom! The spotter, now we're shooting a Raufoss multi-purpose round, and what it is an explosive 50 cal round. So it's just not a bullet. It's got a tungsten steel penetrator with a composition B explosive inside of it. And it's made to puncture armor. And usually when you hit people, it just goes, it's going to just go straight through them, not detonate. But when it hits a sternum, the thing detonated. And so then he went down straight away. And then that was after that little firefight. So there you have it. It was pretty crazy, good stuff, a good exposure, and we did pretty well. I think, in that none of us were wounded and we all lived. Then they sent a kid, like a 10-year-old kid came out and picked up the rocket, the launcher. And I'm not sure if somebody did that to him to see if we would shoot him or what was up with that. But, we're not going to shoot the kid. You don't even have a RPG in it. And maybe it was just a kid that came by to do it, or maybe someone told him. Who knows? So that afternoon was pretty mellow. There was another guy that I shot at that was out in there was a big cinder block wall that surrounded the runway. And there was a cinder block missing, and there was this guy that would stick his head through there and shoot at anytime that the hovercrafts were coming into the beach. So I shot at him, and I wound up hitting the cinder block right next to where the hole was, because it was 700 yards away. There was quite a bit of wind, and didn't make that shot. Now, the next day, we get a call from the Marine colonel who we were working under, and he said that, hey, there is a guy with an anti-tank weapon, and it was one of these Somalis that somehow he had an AT-4, which is an 84 millimeter projectile, and it's one of our anti-armor weapons. And he had one, and he was occupying, he was standing on top of a set of bunkers that was like a couple hundred yards from where our lines were. And they'd been shooting at him, and he would hide and come back out. And the fear was, they're like, hey, this guy's waiting for when we start to move our armor around, and he's going to shoot it at our armor. The other sniper was too far away, so they sent an armored vehicle down to pick up me and my OIC, and then we went to meet the colonel. He said, hey, this guy is at this position. I'm going to have you get up in this tower where there are some recon Marines. They'll let you know where the guy is, and what we want you to do is shoot at him. Hopefully you hit him. If you don't, we're going to have he's going to go into this bunker, and we're going to move a bunch of vehicles around with some, bigger guns on them. They had like 25 millimeter coax cannons or something, and they're going to tear the bunker apart. Like, okay, roger that. So we head up in the tower. This is like a 3-story tower at one point, but the top had been blown off of it. So it's 2 stories now, and there's a bunch of a battalion recon Marines who, they were on the ship with us. I knew them. And so we went and linked up with them, and they pointed out where this bunker complex was. And so I look at my map, and I'm like, God dang, it's 1,000 yards away. And there's a consistent 20-mile-an-hour wind blowing full value right to left. And so I'm like, okay. So I get my rifle all bunkered in, so I got a good solid shooting position, and then it's a waiting game. We're waiting for him to come out. They're like, hey, the guy will come out. He's with like 7 other guys, and they'll stand around, smoke cigarettes, and then they'll go back down in the bunker. So I bum a dip off the guys. We're just up there shooting the shit. And they're like, oh, okay, he's coming up, he comes up. So I get on my rifle, and I've got a perfect position. I am just locked in on him. A lot of wind. I dial for this 20 miles an hour of wind. This is a 1,000-yard shot. Shoot. Now, at the time, there's probably 2 or 3 people in the world that could make a shot like this without computers and all the other aids that we have today, and that kind of wind blowing. And I'm not one of them. I missed and hit his buddy. So, according to the spotter, I shoot one of the guys standing 3 feet to the right of the guy with the AT-4 that I was aiming at. He's just standing there smoking his cigarette with his, AK-47. Wham! It downs him, and then they all ran down in the bunker. To which case the Marines just dunk, 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 dunk. All the coax guns on their light armored vehicles tore it up. Then the dust settled, and then the guy with the AT-4 got out and ran away without the AT-4, and now that was it. That was it for that. But that was my first couple days combat experience back in the 90s when there wasn't a whole lot of combat going on.
And I would like to say now, Jason, that is not a mellow afternoon.
Definitely doesn't sound mellow
by any stretch of the imagination. That is not mellow. That's that's quite I suppose a nice entry into the world of firefights. Not completely crazy, just a nice little entry into what was to come.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Especially as you said, because at that time, the US forces didn't have much experience in full combat. From the back end of Vietnam up until that point, there hadn't been any serious major engagements, had there?
So you had Panama, which didn't last all that long. Grenada, which didn't last that long, and so and then obviously 93 in Somalia was like a horrible day, but it was 2 days, and not a lot of people were exposed to it. Not till 2 decades of war now.
Yeah.
So
it's changed because obviously during that time the British military were pretty much consistently involved over in Northern Ireland, so we're used to that kind of urban style of combat, going street to street urban environment, as you were saying, young kids involved. You don't know who's a hostile, who's just a guy walking to go and buy a paper and a pint of milk. It's a different situation.
I had an uncle who was in Northern Ireland and then in Bosnia, so that was his 2 deployments in the British Army. So they were constantly, seeing action to some degree. So how different was everything from Somalia, Jason, to Iraq, Afghanistan, weapons and everything? Was everything massively improved by the time you deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah. Everyone had night vision. We had really, really good night vision. Our weapons had improved to where, at that point we had a magazine fed 50 cal sniper rifle and you didn't have to drag everything out. The communications was better. It was just, we're decades ahead of where we were back in the 90s.
Yeah, it's good thing, I guess. I suppose. I suppose. Like how like the Somalis, were they real primitive, or were they kind of similar to the Taliban, or a little bit more advanced, or?
Yeah, I would say as fighter wise, because these guys have grown up fighting, that they were probably just as skilled and just as tenacious as any of them. Their only limiting factor was they did not have the technology that we did, so they didn't have aircraft overhead, and which is huge leg up, obviously. But other than that, they were just as cunning and crafty and intelligent as anybody else was or is.
Yeah, definitely. So, was and any of these, when an RPG goes over your head, is there any time during that you think, "Oh shit, this might be it"? Is there any of those thoughts, or are you just there doing your job? Think about that later.
Yeah. So in the moment, it occurs to you like, oh, okay, I almost got shot, or I almost got hit, or I had a rocket propelled grenade hit a wall in a fighting position that I was in and knock me out. And so, there I am, I'm shooting out a window. And then the next thing you know, I'm like, why am I laying on the floor? And the whole room's full of dust and my rifle's over there because I've dropped it. And then you're just like, okay, I'll get back up. It's probably similar to getting knocked out as a boxer or whatever. It's similar to my experiences anyway, when I've been knocked out, getting hit over the head by a billy club, being a jerk in the middle of the streets. It's like, oh, I'm up swinging at somebody, and the next thing you know, my perspective is face down on the cement and my arms are wrenched behind me and I'm getting handcuffed. Okay. But yeah, there. You ready for another story?
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So we had this operation in Afghanistan, and it was pretty typical for what we did there. We were going in, and there were some Taliban leaders supposedly living in a couple of compounds that we were going to go hit, and then we were going to hold them for a day or two over a cycle of daylight and just stay there. And so we have the element of surprise. We'd always get inserted by helicopters along, like 4 to 6 kilometers away, so that hopefully the people on the compounds that we're going after don't realize that we're coming for them and all leave, or, get ready for us to come. So we have the element of surprise. So we insert on this operation way back in the hills, and the helicopters take off, and we start patrolling towards the target, and we see these trucks come out from the direction of the village area where we were going to hit these compounds. And these Taliban, we could see the trucks go out, stop, and then we could see guys get out with flashlights, and they're like looking around, and they're out looking for us. So we see them stop a ways off, and then we continue with our patrol, and then they come toward us, and they stopped maybe a couple 100 yards away. And so we just kind of hunkered down on the little hillside that we were on, and the guys dismounted with their flashlights, and they're looking for us, and they're walking around, they're armed. So, immediately we're aggressive. So we organize a couple fire teams to go and kill them. And, we're just getting ready to push the fire teams out from our patrol to go hit them when one of the officers, one of the OICs of the two platoons that was there, mentioned like, hey, we didn't come here to shoot these guys. We could compromise ourselves. They're not the target. Let's just ignore them and head toward the target. So we just let them live. We watched and then kept patrolling towards the target because that was right. It's really easy to get sucked into stuff that doesn't matter out there in the field, and it almost happened to us. They go out, and we start doing our patrol during the target. And on the way there, we run into two separate occasions, guys that are just out standing around in the middle of the night, and they're not armed. They're obviously Taliban, and they'd heard the helicopters. They'll all talk by radios, and they probably all wandered out to see if they could see us. So we snatched those guys up, and what our standard operating procedure was when we'd run across somebody out in the middle of the night that wasn't supposed to be there is we'd have some rigger's tape with us, which is the same as duct tape.
Okay.
And they'd get their hands duct tape behind their back. They would get a nice roll of duct tape all around their head, which we called a happy hat. And we'd put a handle on it too. And then we would duct tape their eyes. And we would just make them walk behind us. And we would bring them with us for about, 600 yards. And then set them down, tape their feet up, and have through the terp like, hey, don't move until the sun comes up because we're going to be watching you. And we patrol off and just leave them there. And obviously, like 20 minutes later, they're going to undo their hands and their feet and, be able to get loose, but we'll be long gone. And so that was the best way to deal with just like basically a combatant who isn't a non-combatant, but he is, but you just not armed. So that's just how we dealt with it. It worked great. We get to the compounds that we're clearing. We find a decent cache of weapons there. And this compound that we were going to hold was kind of problematic because it didn't have any high ground or dominating terrain feature that we could also take to be able to defend it. So all we had was the rooftops of that compound, and there were some areas where we could only see out like 60 yards. And that's pretty dang close. So as we're setting up our defensive perimeter and we're filling sandbags and making our fighting positions up on the rooftops, our EOD guys go out and they go into these blind spots that were there, and they found like trails, and they put booby-trapped pop flares out there. So if someone was trying to sneak up on us, the flares would go up. So sun comes up, it's pretty mellow, not much is going on. The Taliban, we can see some guys like trying to spot on us, but there's no real gunfire. All the women and children in the compounds near us, they all clear out, and it's just kind of mellow till about 8 or 9. It was a little bit later than that, maybe 10, 11 in the morning. And then the aircraft that we had overhead, they're like, hey, we can see people moving into high ground, a high ground position around you, and we can see some other guys starting to stage in a field just past you guys where you can't see. And we're like, okay, check. So we get ready, and then boom, all this machine gun fire kicks off. They start shooting rocket propelled grenades at us. Now we got an F-18 overhead, which is watching the guys with the rocket propelled grenades. It does a gun run over the top of their position on this hilltop and just stitches them all up, which is super. It's really cool when the aircraft are doing gun runs. And we're just in this big firefight. And then the pop flares that we'd laid out there for guys coming in closer, they start going up, and we're getting hand grenades lobbed in toward us. So we're shooting. It's a pretty good little firefight. And I remember one of the guys next to me, who was one of the comms guys, he had a bullet whiz past his head, and I'm like, hey man, you got to watch out. I think somebody's shooting right at you. And he looks at me and he goes, oh my gosh, do you think it's personal? as he's shooting back. So we get aircraft in it. They hammer all the Taliban down. Stuff gets down. And then there's just a little bit of gunfire there. Stuff really quiets down in the afternoon. And then one of the guys up in a fighting position. I'd rotated out of a fighting position, and I was down on the in the compound now, like getting something to eat. And they're like, "Hey, we got a guy that's shooting at us over here." Boom, and they're like, "Oh, we got him. He's down." So I go up to their fighting position, and I'm like, "Where is he?" And they're pointing. He's like, "He's right there. It's just over on that hill." So I tell the task unit commander, I said, "Hey, I want to grab 2 guys, and we'll go and find that body and see if he's got radios or any actual intel on him or anything like that." And he goes, "Okay." So we tell everybody, "Hey, we're going out." So we go out the doors of the compound and walk around the corner, and in the dang compounds there, it's just like this crazy maze of walls and things. And so we thought it would be right around the corner. We wound up going a little bit further away than I would have liked from our original compound. And as we're making our way there, I am patrolling with my Scar Heavy, which is a FN rifle that we had, and the butt stock folded. And I thought it would be kind of sexy and cool looking to patrol with the buttstock folded over instead of it locked out like how it should have been. So I'm walking in front. I have the 2 guys behind me. We turn a corner and we're walking up this little alleyway, and there's a hill up there, and all of a sudden I hear whack, and I look, and there's a guy standing on that hill, and he's shooting at me. So I lock my weapon out and immediately regret my decision not to have that buttstock open, because I can't get a solid shooting position. So I just tried to pin the rifle out on the sling, shoot at him, crack. Because I had the buttstock folded, the weapon short stroked, so it didn't cycle all the way, and it jammed. I took a knee. I didn't miss him by much, so he takes off, and then I had to clear the jam, basically unfuck myself and get back up and ready to fight, and he'd pushed out and got away. So that was a little surprising. And I think we found him the next day on our extract, because there was a guy that had got shot in the leg. So what happened was they shot him in the leg. They didn't kill him. And then, I served myself up to get shot at, and luckily he missed me. So that was pretty funny. And you know what else is kind of funny there is they lock all their animals up in the compounds at night with them, so it's, they don't go out and get lost or somebody steals them or something. So when we occupied this compound, there were like 3 cows in the compound, and they were like their pets. They had like decorations on their horns, and their hooves were painted, and they had little bells and stuff. So we pushed the cows out of the compound and left the doors open, and one of the cows kept coming back in, and she would come back in and get into things. And so there were some guys that were like not on watch, but they were just resting, so they had their gear off. They were over there eating undercover, and this cow comes in, and she's looking around, and she's sniffing at their gear, and she grabs a guy's assault gear and picks it up, and then goes running around the compound. So here we are. This guy is chasing this cow around the compound, trying to get his gear back. And so he jumps on her, which is a bad idea. Cows are pretty strong animals. She just slings him, boom. She drops his stuff, and the cow runs off. And then we wound up having to stinking close the gate, which we had people in another position out that came back, but we just couldn't keep that cow out of there. Pretty funny.
Almost an entire operation, and almost defeated by a cow.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to tell me how so-and-so broke his femur? Well, you mean after he was riding the cow?
That was not in the details of the operation.
No, definitely.
Yeah, we had to come up with a plan. Yeah.
And was that the last time you ever patrolled with your buttstock collapsed?
Yeah. Yeah, you got to watch out because you wind up being a soldier of fashion sometimes, and you think, man, this really looks cool. It's a dumb idea. Inside a vehicle, it's nice to have that buttstock folded up, but outside patrolling, just stupid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anything that keeps you alive a little easier is probably the cool way to do it, right?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's like, hey, when I'm out there riding my horse, I wear a stinking helmet because I had to think about this. What am I out by wearing a helmet? And all I'm out is my vanity is bruised a little bit, but that's it. And the upside is if I get tossed and hit my noggin on a rock or something like that, I'll live. So
Yeah.
screw it. I'll wear a helmet when I ride.
I
Absolutely.
do the exact same when I go skiing. I'm not a very good skier, but whenever I've been
Yeah.
out skiing, all my friends don't wear a helmet. And I'm like, why? Like, look, I've got too many things to do, and I've been hit in the head enough, so I don't need any more. But it's funny because when you were talking about like not knowing where you were in the room, and like being a boxer, the only time I ever got put on my backside boxing was in a fight, and I got dropped by a big super heavyweight right in the chin,
Uh-huh.
and
Oh.
I got up, and the first thing I can remember is the referee standing over me going 6, 7, 8. I can remember getting up. I can remember getting up and looking at one of my friends, and he was fucking get up. So I got up, and the referee says, "Are you okay?" And you go, "Yeah, I'm fine." And the fight went on. It got stopped about a minute later, and afterwards, everybody was saying, that was bullshit, man. There's nothing wrong with you. You looked fine. Everything was good. And I was like, I had no idea what was going on. No idea. All I went was, okay, hold on, Tom, and see what happens. And but everybody else is saying, you looked fine. I was not. I had no idea what was going on. It's, but you try and pretend that you do, but you don't.
Yeah. Have you
No,
ever
I
have you
you
ever
don't
been
need.
choked out, Jason, when you do jujitsu?
Oh yeah,
Because that
yeah.
happened to me a while back. The one time it went really bad, and the guy that was doing it, Dean Coote, shout out to Big Dean, had put me in a triangle when we were just drilling. So I went, like deep into it to let him try it, and I hadn't warmed up because I wasn't supposed to be practicing that day because I was kind of holding on to a bit of a knee injury. So I went in cold. I was like, "Yeah, you've just not quite get it. Just turn round a little bit." And the next thing I remember was our instructor, John, holding on to me, going, "You're okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know I'm okay. Why are you holding me?" And then I looked around and everyone was like pointing, and I was like, "Ah, shit, I went out, didn't I?" And Dean's face was in a pure panic because he'd never choked anyone unconscious before. He's like, I thought you were joking because you were snoring and you're such a fucking wind-up merchant. I thought you were like, oh, yeah, pure. And I just completely gone. And Dean genuinely was like, I thought I'd killed you. And I was like, why is John holding me? Like, you're okay? I was like, yeah, no, I'm okay. Get off me, you freak. And then realized, no, I had been
You,
unconscious.
you had went out. Yeah. So funny.
Oh
Everybody needs to learn that, right?
yeah.
It's
The I was telling that story earlier about this. This is way back in the shoot. It is 1990, and we're in the Philippines and gotten into a. I don't need to go into the details, but let's just suffice it to say there's like 15 SEALs in the middle of Magsaysay Boulevard, and we're in a fight with Shore Patrol. And so I'm fighting with this Shore Patrol guy, and then, like you said, all of a sudden, now my perspective is instead of looking at him, I'm down on the cement. And I'm like, gosh, what am I doing down here? And there's a knee in my back, and I'm getting cuffed. And then I get picked up and loaded into a paddy wagon. And they caught another guy that was with me, and it happened to be his 21st birthday, and that's why we were really burning it. And this guy is a strong dude, big power lifter and everything. And so they put him in the paddy wagon next to me. And they just put us in the paddy wagon, but we're not handcuffed to the seats. So it's driving, and then it stops because the paddy wagon's like at a stoplight or something. He gets up and he kicks open the door. Boom! Door flies open and he's gone. And the guys driving, they hear that and they bail out. So I'm sitting back there and I go, oh, shoot. all right, I'm out of here too. I jump out of the paddy wagon and make like 3 steps. Bang! I get hit on the head again and clobbered again. And at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm just cooperating with you the rest of the night. Take me to the drunk tank, and I'll sleep this one off.
So it's all good fun when you get some serious blows to the head. It's,
Yeah.
It's quite funny. It's that moment where you're going, why am I on the floor?
Yeah. What is going on?
What happened? Oh
Yes,
man, yeah.
Thank you. I'll have
that's
some
funny.
coffee.
yeah, and I'm going to not have some alcohol for a while, right?
That's right.
Never again.
Yeah, it's always a bad idea. It's are we still? Are you okay for time, Jason? I think we've done
Yeah.
like an hour.
Yeah.
You still cool? Okay.
Had
Yeah,
you just
so-
doubling back a little bit, Jason, on some of the stories? Was the Navy something you always wanted to get into from like a young kid? Was there a background to you joining the Navy and ending up a SEAL? Did it just look fucking awesome? Like, what was the story with you joining up before even that first deployment?
My dad was a Marine, and I remember when I was like 7 years old, I was really torn on what I wanted to do with my life because I really, really love the outdoors. And so part of me wanted to get some kind of job where I would be in the outdoors, like being a ranger or being an ecologist or a scientist of some kind, in some kind of life sciences. And then the other part of me really had thought that the military was appealing. And it's at 7, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do the military first. That's something that I wanted to do. So I kind of had my heart set on, I was going to join the Marine Corps. And then I was taking a martial art called Kaju Kempo when I was in middle school and into high school, and one of my instructors was a SEAL in Vietnam. And there wasn't a lot of info out about the SEALs, but my parents are like, holy cow, did you know that your instructor here was a Navy SEAL? And I'm like, what the heck is that? Do they do mammals or something? And they said, no, they're like the Naval Special Forces are really cool. And so I did a little more research on it of what I could that was available. And it, the maritime aspect of it, because I did grow up on the beach, I swam and played water polo. I'm like, oh, this is for me. This is what I want to do. And so when I enlisted, the intent was I would just do 4 or 6 years and get out. And then I just kept re-enlisting. I actually did get out at one point. When my first wife wanted me to get out, and then, just our marriage didn't work out. As soon as it was done, I came right back on active duty.
It seems like you 100% found your calling in life.
Yeah.
If there's ever any civil war in the UK, I'm phoning you. You seem like the guy that I want on my side. I've never seen anybody so comfortable with violence.
Oh.
Yeah.
Shoot. So hey, there was one thing that occurred to me here when we were just talking about drinking, and it was advice that I gave my oldest son. Typically I'm a beer drinker, and where I run into trouble is when somebody comes around with the tray of shots and they're like, hey, we all got to do shots, because everyone gets so excited. It's really difficult to say, yeah, I'm not doing a shot. It's almost impossible. And so I can remember being in Las Vegas and I was like 33 years old, I think. And it was the same thing. We're all out drinking. It's going good. I'm pacing myself just right. And then somebody buys a round of shots, and 1 turns into 2, turns into 3. And then the next thing you know, I'm hugging the toilet, just throwing my guts up, wondering, I'm 33 years old. Why am I doing this all the time? So I developed this standard operating procedure for when the shots come around. They're like, hey, we're doing shots. And I go, all right, give me a shot. Woohoo. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Let's all do shots. Woohoo. And I spill the whole thing. No one will ever notice. And then you just, you down it. And you're like, that was awesome. Put it down and you're good to go. You've done your little social bit, so everyone feels good about doing the shot together. But later on, you won't be like wrapping your car around a telephone pole or hugging the toilet, praying at the porcelain altar, as they say.
So last year, Jason, just because you mentioned shots, last year I was in Portugal with a buddy of mine. We went away for a long weekend, and we were in this some bar, and there was a one of those punch machines. So my buddy says, I'm going to hit that, full of beer. I said, I'm going to hit that, and I said, have a shot. I said, I don't like hitting those things. I'm fucking not doing it. Have a shot. Okay, so I hit it and break the record. And he says, do it again. So I hit it again and I broke my own record. By this time, there's all these Portuguese like bar staff, and they're all starting to watch. So then I keep trying to break my own records. So I'm getting like 960, 970, and then they all go, "Fuck, we've never seen this before. Have some Sambuca." No, okay. So I'm drinking Sambuca after Sambuca. So my friend, he still has it on his phone. He has a picture of me that night lying on the balcony in my own pizza, face down, just groaning. So I feel your pain on the shots. It's a terrible idea when you're in your 30s.
But you have to do it though, don't you? You have to go through the point of doing that regularly to then go, actually, no, I can't do that anymore.
I can't do that.
Do you know
anymore.
what I mean? You can't have not done it ever. You have to have experienced it, don't you?
Of course.
Yeah, that seems to be the case with me. I wish that I was able to. There's a lot of advice people give out, and I guess at some point you're like, yeah, I'll take your advice if that's a bad idea, but it isn't the case when you're a young man, and I guess that's how we just push the envelope.
Of course,
absolutely. Talking about drinking story. I spent a couple of months living in Greece when I was 20 years old. I went out for 2 weeks holiday, got offered a job in a bar. Chris, I don't know if you know this story. And the bar staff, we got really friendly and they said, do you want a job? We can't really pay you very much, but we can give you somewhere to stay and we can give you free food in the bar. So when you're 20, you're like, yeah, this will be a fun thing. So a quick phone home to the parents. I'm not coming home. I'll see you in a few months' time. And the place they put us up in it would have been a 0-star hotel. It wouldn't have even had a star. And it was back in 1999. So it was back when Greece still had the drachma. It had no actual plumbing. It wasn't like a proper shower or anything. But the worst part of it all was the toilet drained into the same drain as the shower.
Oh my God.
But basically, if you imagine the front, like when you're sitting on the toilet, at the front, there was almost like a mouse hole cut in the front of the toilet. So when you flushed it, it used to flush out through a central gutter between your feet that then drained into this central drain in the middle of the floor. Now, there was two of us that stayed there. Me and my friend ended up staying out. And as you can imagine, two 19, 20-year-old guys, boozing a lot, has issues with the stomach. And the amount of times we had to waffle stomp that shower floor to clear it in the morning was absolutely horrific. It was honestly the worst thing ever.
Corn? When did I eat corn? Yeah.
And that's the thing. We were just eating hot dogs, fast food, drinking horrifically, eating horrifically. There was no air conditioning. There was no fan. 42 degrees outside, which is about 110 or something. It was horrific. And we stayed there for 2 months. 2 months we stayed there for before we gave up and came home.
Yeah. The joys of being a young man. The joys of being a young man.
Only with alcohol did it work.
These days that's not going to work for me at all. We stayed in some horrendous places when we were younger. Now it's like I need a good double mattress. And I need 8 hours sleep, so I'm not partying. Man. Right, I'm having some internet issues. So if it's okay with you guys, can we wrap up? It keeps breaking up it keeps telling me I'm losing signal and stuff.
What's going on? Man. We've had an hour's worth of recording anyway. So again, another fun time and some awesome stories as always, Jason.
Thank you.
If you ever find yourself in Scotland,
I will hit you guys up. Scotland is on my bucket list, and I'll give you a heads up before heading out there.
No shots. No shots, okay?
Well, we know your SOP now. Even if we do order shots, we know your SOP. We're like, no cheers, straight down the hatch.
I quit drinking 2 years ago, so it's all good. So unless we're doing shots of espresso, it'll be no shot.
With the espresso and Iron Brew, we'll go all out.
Yeah, definitely. It was awesome, Jason. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. And man, I'm sure we'll speak again at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Alistair, Chris, thanks for having me, guys.
Anytime. Well, episode 50, War Stories with Jason Gardner. What a way to bring up the half century of the Silly Goose Gang podcast.
The Silly Goose Gang podcast.